Good morning, everyone. I don't usually like to interrupt conversations, but today we must begin. We have a full day here at Mountain Connect. Audrey Danner, thank you for joining Jeff Gavlinski and I at Mountain Connect, and please come up and tell us how your experience is so that we can continue to improve. This morning, I'm very pleased we have reached out to our federal elected officials, senators, and representatives, and Senator Cory Gardner was kind enough to video a short message. Senator Gardner is in session. He'll be here this weekend on the horrific fires that we are having all around western Colorado, and they will continue. We just know that. That is the standard of fire season. I would like to introduce at this point Betsy Bear. Betsy is out of the Grand Junction office, but I see her in Denver quite often. So please welcome Betsy.
Thanks, Audrey, and thanks so much for having us and the senator. Like Audrey said, he's so sad that he couldn't be here, but I was just talking. I get to cover the best part of the state because I have the whole western Colorado, everything from the Divide to the Utah border. And something I hear in every community that I go to and meet with people is rural broadband, rural broadband, rural broadband, and how we make that work. So without further ado, I think you want to hear from my boss, but thanks so much. Thank you,
Betsy.
Hi, I'm Senator Cory Gardner. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you today in beautiful Vail, Colorado, but thank you for allowing me to share a few thoughts with you. I appreciate you all attending this conference to learn more about broadband and how we can help work together to improve broadband access throughout our country. As community leaders, business owners, and local elected officials, you all know how important broadband is to our communities. Broadband connectivity is vital to the success of businesses across the country. From small rural towns out on the eastern plains, where I'm from, to a bustling metropolis like Denver, we need strong, reliable broadband. Internet access helps create jobs, promote entrepreneurship, and expand economic opportunity. It gives the owner of a brick and mortar shop the chance to reach new markets by advertising her merchandise on social media. It allows a farmer to utilize precision agriculture to increase crop yields and save water. It allows someone to solve an everyday problem with an innovative phone app. In short, it gives anyone with a good idea the chance to succeed. I recently introduced bipartisan legislation called the Airwaves Act that would provide additional funding for broadband build-out. Our bill would allocate 10% of funds generated from federal spectrum sales directly to wireless broadband infrastructure build-out in unserved and underserved areas throughout rural communities across the country. Looking at our last two spectrum auctions alone, this would have totaled about $7 billion for additional rural broadband investment. This is common sense legislation that can really make a difference, and I hope that you will all join me in advocating for the bill to become law. Now, one area that I know can surely benefit from more broadband is the healthcare sector. Innovative new technologies like telehealth can transform the way patients in rural communities receive healthcare, but this will only be possible if we have the infrastructure already in place to deliver the service. Everyone deserves access to healthcare services regardless of whether they live in rural or urban areas, and telehealth can provide that quality care to even the most remote places of Colorado and the country. And while everything seems to become a partisan issue these days, we need to make sure that support for our broadband remains bipartisan. More broadband is good for Democrats, Republicans, independents, and anyone that wants America to remain the global leader in innovation. I look forward to working with you all to continue to promote broadband build-out in the future. And thank you for allowing me to take just a little bit of your time this morning. Enjoy your time here in Vail, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you for Senator Cory Gardner. And Betsy is in the beautiful green top. Seek her out. She's already had commissioners and others coming up to her with questions, so very appropriate. At this point, I want to ask if you would like additional breakfast or a cup of coffee. You'll need to pick that up now, and then we will begin. This morning, We will continue in the tradition of Mountain Connect of learning and solid information so that we can have new experiences to understand, to question, to talk to people about. We have Eugene, Oregon here today. And Eugene is represented by Pam Berrian and Ann Fifield. And if they would come up, we will have a presentation. There's steps over here or over there. We will have a presentation of how they determined what they were needing for their city of Eugene, Oregon, and how they went about with the steps to create some success in their communities. As always, we will have the lessons learned, this is what we could have done differently or better. It's very important that we learn from each other, so we're very pleased to have Pam Berrian and Ann Fifield. Thank you, ladies. And there's your clicker.
Thank you. So I'm Pam, and I'm in IT at the City of Eugene, and I also deal with rights of way, franchising, licensing you might call it, wireless siting, co-locations on existing poles, use of city property, and special projects. Ann is in the planning department. So I appreciate the invitation to present information about our community broadband planning process and how it led to some exciting projects. One of which is gaining a lot of national attention. And actually, Jeff got to us really early in our public process about this. So it's really neat that we are here today to share it with you. And Ann will cover that particular project. I'm going to introduce a couple of slides about the planning process that led to this and other projects. I'm also excited to be here, as is Ann, because we came here to gather information because we want to update our own community broadband plan, which is 5 years old now. So it's a perfect opportunity all the way around. At the end of the presentation, you'll see several web links that you can access. One is for a state planning process that will describe the 8 broadband models, of which Eugene is one of them. One is my own program's website, which has the broadband plan on it as well. One is Ann's website for the fiber project in particular that we're talking about today. And one is for a Connecting Oregon program, which is an 18-year-old fiber trade with level 3, where we traded right-of-way use fees from Southern Oregon to Eugene and from the coast to Eugene. And that's in its 18th year of trading right-of-way use fees for 12 fiber. So Eugene is the second largest city of Oregon. Salem would say that as well. So we have a population of about 157,000, and 25,000 of those are the University of Oregon students, Go Ducks. Our largest college is the University of Oregon, but it has 3 colleges in Eugene. We're about 44 square miles, about an hour and a half south of Portland, west of the Cascades. We have a highly educated professional residential population. So we didn't have, coming into the Federal Telecom Act of '96 or in the aftermath, we didn't feel that we had a so-called digital dust bowl fear that Eastern Oregon had, and I think I heard it called digital deserts here in Colorado. But we saw that high bandwidth interest was growing at a pretty fast pace. But complaints started coming into City Hall about 5 years ago, and that Eugene was becoming a digital monopoly with little competition to drive prices down, especially the calls were coming in from our growing tech industry. So as we know, local government officials work hard to develop solutions that are in the public interest. When educational and economic livelihoods demand equitable broadband access to that found in larger urban areas, like in our case, Portland, and affordability or accessibility, as we think that they're interchangeable, is threatened because there's little or no competition and choice to drive prices down, local government's going to act. They'll act with incentives, begging, partnerships, you name it. At the same time, the telecommunications landscape is risky. It's sometimes adversarial and litigious, from state to federal regulatory agencies to legislators and Congress to the courts. But we found, as you find in local government, and as I heard yesterday, fresh ideas are thriving in an environment where municipalities are not afraid to engage in honest, transparent discussions about their needs and desires. So, about local government. As staff, we know that local officials are constantly hearing from the residents that they want tomorrow's public services today. But elected officials have yesterday's dollars to pay for them. So it's no big secret, well, actually, so as staff, we're always trying to elbow in, take our project, get our idea, move this on, pay for this. And it's rather difficult at times as staff when you have so many things on the plate of your city council. So it's no big secret as staff that the plans adopted by a city council get the attention. It's because a plan enables your elected officials to feel confident in their decisions. So that's exactly what Ann and I set out to do. The next two slides are really from a state website that is accessible to you and will have a host of information that you could use to initiate any one of 8 models should you choose to do so. There are tribal models, there are rural models, and there are tri-city models. Ours is a single city model. The next two slides are from the State of Oregon website. And the particular 8 models were initiated by a federal broadband assistance grant. So just as Ann and I and her predecessors were discussing how we would find time in our workload to develop a plan, the state of Oregon found it for us. So we applied, and we luckily won one of the 8 model plan technical assistance grants. But as I said, you don't have to wait for that kind of a grant to come to you. The state the state process was designed to have all of its processes and information on this website. So I think it's a great amount of information. So using existing staff, there was a facilitated process that brought 45 private and public sector stakeholders together. And this wasn't, it wasn't lopsided with 40 local government and 5 private providers, or 40 private providers and 5 local government. This really was split, wireline, wireless, about 50-50. So the plan included strategic objectives and projects that range from 12 months to 5 years. So this is the second slide from the state's website. The federal assistance grant provided each recipient with a particular planning model and outline. It was a lot of homework at the time. I want to give a shout out to Nancy Jesuel if she's in the room. She is at this conference, and she was one of the federally funded technical assistance providers. And I'm so happy that she's still around today at this conference, especially. This page on the state's website also includes an introductory descriptive video link, which I'm not activating here. So the city staff and I, from planning and we primed ourselves with the federal technical assistance facilitators and got to work. And as I said, it was a lot of homework. At the same time, the mayor started a so-called blue ribbon outreach committee to the what ended up to be 45 stakeholders, and they're listed in our plan. At the outset, grant recipients worked with the federal assistance team to identify a particular focus of our work. Some cities chose STEM education, some cities chose digital literacy, some chose workforce development, especially if they were in a timber area. We chose economic vitality and regional prosperity because of the emerging tech hub needs, which Ann will go into in just a bit. The federal technical assistance team then worked with our 45 stakeholders to develop a broad vision statement, 1 or more. So this is a sample of ours. We had to develop foreseeable strategic goals that we thought would be achievable within 12 months to 5 years. This is a sample of ours. The goals were then developed into objectives and projects. For the strategic objectives and projects work, the 45 stakeholders self-selected into 45 groups. And the groups could borrow each other as they were needed particular expertise to finish their particular segment. So these were our 4-year or 5-year goals and objectives. And the second one, as you see, does include community development and public services, because you remember, residents want tomorrow's technology today. Pilot projects were our method of testing the implementation of a strategic objective. So we felt the pilots and demos weren't going to be a hard sell because the council was behind our particular stakeholder process. But remember, the cities are trying to meet tomorrow's demands today with yesterday's dollars. So in many communities, we see extended financial discussions occur at this stage, and that can result in any objective growing stale and the plan sitting on the shelf. In particular to Eugene, in the late 90s, shortly after the passage of the Federal Telecom Act and after a year of public work sessions, the City Council developed a telecommunications set of visions and policies. That's about 1997. And then when the National League of Cities advised cities to start thinking right away about the influx of the anticipated wireless and wireline providers coming to Eugene to service. They were going to be there right after the day after the Telecom Act passed. And in addition, though, just in case, the City Council adopted a 2% gross revenues tax with the express purpose of funding new city telecom technology projects of community benefit to reduce the digital divide. As it turns out, this fund became a viable funding vehicle for our Community Broadband Plan, even though it does compete with other projects. Since fiscal year '03, there are over 150 IT and telecom technology projects have been funded by this fund. And I have to be very transparent with the fund that I manage. And so all of those projects are on my particular program website. I want to briefly introduce 2 projects from our broadband plan. One involved a different twist to digital literacy, and that was specific to youth coding. The Eugene and Springfield are sitting next door, those K through 12. U of O and Lane Community College teamed up to develop a 3-year project to introduce coding to youth. They called it Digital Dojo. With innovative outreach, using the area game developing community and other tech hub businesses as mentors, it was an overwhelming success. Our 3-year demo funding ended, but it continues today. That Digital Dojo Youth Coding Project won a National Digital Literacy Project Award. The second project solidified a theme that excited all 4 of our stakeholder groups: recruiting and retaining the incoming tech developers. If our area couldn't be a Silicon Valley, there were so many companies moving into the Willamette Valley, where Eugene is located, we were starting to be called Silicon Shire. And actually, if you Google it, you'll see a number of tech hub companies that have adopted that name today. When the tech hubs needed broadband competition and choice to drive prices down for the high bandwidth they needed, we thought they'd move to Portland to find it. Why? Because they told us they would. And they almost did, but they didn't. What did we do quickly enough to stop the tech move to Portland and win a state telecommunications award on the way? It was something our stakeholders outlined and our elected officials approved when we adopted our Community Broadband Plan. And it was something we never knew had never been done before. So I'll turn it over to Ann to talk a little bit about that. Thank you.
So I'm Ann Fifield. I work in economic development at the City of Eugene. And so what Pam is talking about, let's make sure I can use this correctly. Nope. Oh, it's the big green one. It's the obvious button. That's the one you push. So what Pam's Telecom Fund funded was a pilot project to test the feasibility of building a dark fiber network in downtown Eugene. And to do that, the city of Eugene had to partner with a couple of other public agencies. One was LCOG. It's our local council of governments. They've provided a lot of telecommunications support and services to Western Oregon for a very long time. But they had recently built the Willamette Internet Exchange, known as the WIX. It's a small carrier-neutral facility that provides a physical hub for smaller ISPs to connect into this one space and then connect up to a larger exchange up in Portland. And then also, EWEB is the Eugene Water and Electric Board. It's a public utility. It's separate from the city of Eugene. It has its own elected board. And in the late 1990s, about the time of the 96 Telecom Act, the voters of Eugene explicitly authorized EWEB so that they could build a telecom network and they could function as an ISP. That was the late 90s. They'd never acted on it, but they had the authorization to do it. EWEB also brought an unusual asset to the community. They used to have, there was an abandoned steam pipe network that was underground downtown Eugene and over at the U of O. They used to produce steam and pipe it through these pipes in heated buildings through this steam pipe network. Well, the pipes had been abandoned, and a lot of people thought, you know, this is this opportunity that's all these pipes underground. Let's just run fiber through these pipes. Some of them, they're like 4 inches big. They've got plenty of space. Let's see if this works. So EWEB looked at these pipes. We had a couple images. It didn't work out. They were old, they were corroded, they ran lines through and they hit blockages, they just couldn't get through. But even if we could undo those blockages, that steam pipe network was not ubiquitous. It didn't go to every building. But then EWEB offered up this other idea. They said, you know, we've got this underground electric network in the downtown. It's got a lot of space in it. Why don't we run microduct through this underground network? So in the 1950s, that's when they undergrounded all of the above ground wires, they put it underground, and they've got all of this space in there. And so that's what we tested with the pilot project that was funded by Pam's Telecom Fund. And so in 2014, we started this project. And we tested this microduct product, and so then I have my sample here, but the vendors here, there's the microduct all over the place. When I do talks on this locally, this is my sample, and I show everybody the microduct. Most people have no idea what microduct is. You guys are a different audience. And so this system, this is EWEB installing the microduct into an electric vault connecting to the WIX. It's really non-invasive procedure. We don't have to open the streets. You open these vaults in the sidewalk and in the street. You run microduct from vault to vault. Once it's connected in the building, you blow fiber from the WIX into the building. You never even notice that. A lot of folks, it happens and you don't even notice it happens because it happens in an afternoon and poof, it's done. And so we connected through the pilot project. By mid-2014, we connected 2 buildings. It was technically feasible to connect to these buildings. At the end, so it was mid-2014, that's when these buildings got connected. I started at the city in January of 2015. The fiber had been lying underground, connected to 2 buildings, doing nothing for 6 months. One of the first things that came onto my work plan, my new manager at the city said, we've got this pilot project, we've got this fiber project, it is stuck. Unstick it. So I had to figure out how to unstick it. I have no technical background at all. Before I came to the city, I ran my own consulting firm out of my house. The IT support was terrible because I did it. And it was so bad that I had a project that had some kind of video component. I couldn't make it work. It was overdue to the client. I had to call the client to say, I'm sorry, I know it was supposed to get to you this morning. I cannot get it to you till end of day because I need to wait for my technical assistant. He's in meetings until about 3:30 this afternoon. That's because my technical assistant was at middle school and I had to wait for my son to come home to fix my project. That's the technical skills I brought to this project. None. So I had to figure out a lot of stuff. I went through a tremendous learning curve that was really, really fun to do. I think I was very lucky to have this project land on my lap. And so what we found out, what we kind of worked through, was that the building owners of these two buildings, they were kind of indifferent to this fiber connection. They were basically at full occupancy. Everybody in the building it's not like they didn't have telecommunications in the building. They were fine. What did they care? They're getting their rent. Life is good. Some of the tenants in the building were very frustrated. It was the tenants mostly in the software industry. Very big data needs. They're paying very large prices. The service is less than adequate. They were the ones really advocating for this. They had pushed hard to make this pilot project happen, and nothing was happening. And there was this disconnect between the tenants and the property owners. And somehow we had to solve that problem. And what happened is we got lucky. A big thing that happened at about this time, about 2 months after I started at the city of Eugene, the Technology Association of Oregon brought somebody down to Eugene. The TAO has been a Portland-based organization for a long time. It used to be the Software Organization, Software Association of Oregon. They became the Technology Association. They've been in Portland for a long time. It's a state organization, but very focused in Portland. Our local tech sector had advocated to bring somebody to Eugene, so he started. And it turns out we were very lucky with this person. His previous job, he'd actually been the CIO at eWeb. He had a really strong technical background. But it was also lucky because many years before that, he had done the IT for a firm I worked for. So I knew him. We were able to just start working together seamlessly, no problem. And having that relationship just really helped things go smoothly. He was able to sort of bridge the gap between the public space that I was working in and the private space of the building owners, and kind of figure out how we could solve this problem of actually lighting the fiber in the building. And so what he did is he reached out to local ISPs that were working in the region that maybe had a presence in the WICS, and worked with them so that they could figure out how to reach the tenants. And so what he did was he invited one regionally based ISP to come to give a presentation in one of these buildings. Tenants from both buildings came, and so that they could say, this is the services we're offering, and this is how we can connect the building. And so the guy from this ISP did a presentation, and I think the deal was, it was maybe $140, $150 a month. I don't remember the service level they were offering, but to connect the building, they were going to require a 60% take rate. 60% of the tenants in each building were going to have to sign up. You could see that, and so like a number of tenants from the building were watching this presentation. You could just watch them deflate. 60%. You know, somebody's got a contract that ends in 2 months. Somebody else has a contract that ends in 3 years. How were they going to get to 60%? It was just, this isn't what was supposed to have happened. So the guy did his presentation, and everyone's kind of sitting there looking really disappointed. And this guy in the back of the room pipes up, and he says, hi, I'm from this other ISP. We'll provide gigabit service to anybody in the building for $99 a month. And everyone watching that presentation, they physically shifted their focus from the guy in the corner to this new guy. The guy in the corner, I don't even know if he left, I don't know what happened to him. Everybody focused on this new guy. And so it was a market in action. It was the most exciting market in action I've ever had the opportunity to witness. I worked on the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange one summer in college. This was much more exciting. It was an organic process, 2 different competitors competing, and boom, we got a better price, we got faster service. And that is what triggered activity. People got connected in the building, and for $99 a month gigabit service, that's competitive with prices that we see in very big cities. Suddenly, Eugene was getting national level service at a low cost price. It was a game changer for the project, and it was sort of that day that was this, we got over this really big hurdle of going nowhere for a long time. And so in that process, and this is actually an image of this is the very first, when we lit the fiber. This was a very hot day in a very hot closet of connecting the fiber to the very first tenant. And it was really satisfying as a non-techie to watch it, because they plugged it in, they did speed test, and it was like 300 megabits per second. And they're like, well, what's this gigabit service y'all are talking about? And we did it again, they did it this way, they tried a different computer, we tested it like 6 times, and it turns out that the speed test was running like through London or something, so it wasn't going the actual path the data would normally go. But it was very satisfying to watch these techie guys get really frustrated by installing it. It felt like, at home with the Xbox or whatever my kids have to install for me. And so in the pilot project, we learned a number of very important lessons. The first one was that it's technically feasible. This whole microduct and the electric conduit, it works. We had initially connected 2 buildings, but then that pilot project funded a 3rd building. LCOG, with the wicks in the basement of their building, they realized, oh, we can just run fiber up and serve our building. And then also a building across the street, there was an underground tunnel, and they just ran fiber through that building. So we had 5 buildings connect. We've got this huge network of 5 buildings in downtown Eugene. But we also learned really important lessons about markets. We had to work with property owners, and we had to explain to them how it worked. And we also needed to provide information to the potential customers and the ISPs. And one thing that we've learned in this process is the tech sector, they're very savvy. They're the ones who advocated for this. They know what high-speed internet really means. The attorney firms, the CPAs, they're not really that knowledgeable about it. And so there's a lot more education that has to happen with the rest of the community. But that's what we learned in the pilot project. If you build it, they won't necessarily come. You've got to do a lot more work to actually serve the network and make it a successful network so that it's truly competitive. And so with it being a success, we decided, let's expand it. Let's expand it to downtown Eugene. And when we formed a little committee of folks, it's me from the city, another person from the city, and then a guy from eWeb, a guy from LCOG, and then the guy from TAO. We're the fiber implementation team. We're the FIT. And usually we meet every Thursday at 9 o'clock, so I'm not there this week. But it's been a really good process, that interagency process, to work with everybody. So the first thing we had to do was, we decided, let's bring it to downtown. What is downtown Eugene? It's not like it's a set boundary. It's not like it's really clear. So we had to identify a service area. And what we did was we decided that the service area was where electric utilities had been undergrounded. That was the technical method we tested in the pilot. Let's just stop it there. It gives us a reasonable border, so we can't just keep creeping out. Nope, that's it. It's a physical method that we're doing it. That's what we're going to do. And then eWeb did some engineering within there, and they found out that on the eastern edge, there's a compression in the pipes. We can't actually get it through. We'd have to trench the streets. So we decided we're focusing on this blue area. And so that is the fiber service area that we're going to build this to. The fiber project also included a couple other elements. One, the WICS was getting a little full, so we decided let's expand the WICS. We don't have space we had room for maybe 2 more ISPs to locate a shelf in there, so it was getting really crowded. But we also put 2 and 2 together. You can build all of this fiber network into the buildings, gigabit connections to buildings coming into the WICS, and we didn't have very big backhaul out of the WICS. So it was only going to be as fast as that backhaul. All the ISPs in the WICS were paying for their own backhaul up to the Portland Exchange, and they're all paying essentially retail rates on this backhaul. And so we figured out what we wanted to do was buy a wholesale large connection to Portland, and then we would resell that to the local ISPs at a much lower price than what they were able to negotiate on their own. It was basically, we went to Costco and bought backhaul, and then we're reselling it to folks. And so with all of those pieces, the fiber build, what the eWeb engineer estimated it was going to cost $2.7 million to do the fiber build. The WICS expansion and the middle, we're calling that backhaul connection the middle mile. It's not really the right name, but it's what we called it, and we're stuck with it. The whole shebang was going to be about $4 million. How can we possibly pay for $4 million? We're Oregon, we don't have a sales tax. We have a really limited property tax revenue, and we have income tax. We are very fiscally constrained. $4 million does not just appear out of nowhere. And so what we did, the most obvious local source, that's a little graphic that shows the middle mile, is urban renewal. Eugene has 2 urban renewal districts. It's a tax increment financing method that can be used. It's very appropriate to use for infrastructure. It's actually what paid to underground the electrical in the 1950s. The city's urban renewal district paid for that to happen using the same funding source. And so the black line is the downtown urban renewal district. The pink lines are the riverfront urban renewal district. You can see only a smidgen of the fiber was going to be covered by that other urban renewal district, but the bulk of it was going to be covered by the downtown urban renewal district, which was set to sunset. It's very politically controversial because it takes money from other taxing districts. And so council was ready to kill the urban renewal district. There was a lot of advocacy from TAO and our local Chamber of Commerce to amend the urban renewal plan and include, and we identified a few projects it would fund, and one was the fiber project. And so, but it cannot pay for anything outside of that district boundary. It can only pay for capital costs inside its boundary. So the blue area outside the black hash marks, we still got to pay for that. So we went to the state of Oregon. They have a grant for, it's the Infrastructure Finance Authority. It funds infrastructure. And this is infrastructure, so we applied for a $500,000 grant. It has some strings attached. You have to show that it's creating jobs. We were going to get there no problem. We could meet all of their criteria. We applied for it. Our local person advocated for it. Her manager advocated for it. The guy at the top of this economic development agency turned us down. And I think basically this was 2 years ago. He couldn't get his head around the fact that fiber was infrastructure. This is a funding source that's typically used to fund sewer and water. And he was like, fiber, what is this fiber thing? And so we didn't get $500,000, which was, I'm still very disappointed in it. I think it's the state's loss. They get to take no credit for our project at this point. I do think since that happened, that agency is now explicitly funding fiber builds to rural areas. I like to think that our project wasn't successful with them, but we sort of catalyzed a shift in the way they think about fiber and telecom now. At least that's what I think. So then the other opportunity that we found was the Federal Economic Development Administration offers economic development grants for infrastructure, and so we applied for one. In July of 2016, we submitted a pre-application. We were invited to submit a full application in October of 2016. We submitted follow-up paperwork and more follow-up paperwork and more follow-up paperwork. And finally, in May of 2017, 10 months after we had submitted a pre-application, we were awarded the grant. And it was $1.9 million, a 50% match for everything we were building. We had already purchased that middle mile connection. That was already going. So this was just for the infrastructure build, the WICS expansion and the fiber build. And so in the EDA grant, we have two different parts, the fiber build and the WICS expansion. And so now we had to do the hard work with the EDA. After 10 months of application process, now we actually had to figure out how to make it work. And it was a huge amount of administrative work to work with them to try to get this to line up. And so it was months and months of negotiations and paperwork. We had to meet this criteria and that criteria, and it was really complicated and painful. And we couldn't build our fiber network. We had been awarded a grant, we had local funds, but if we spent money at that time on the fiber build, we risked the EDA not providing their 50% match. So we had to put things on hold. It was a terrible place to be because not only could we tell people, oh, so you want to connect your building, well, we don't know when we're going to get to your building, and we don't know when we'll know when we're going to get to your building. We had no information. It was a terrible place to be. And meanwhile, buildings wanted to connect. The 5 buildings that had connected were at full occupancy. Businesses wanted the connectivity. And so there were squeaky wheels asking for connections. And businesses had made business decisions expecting to be connected to it. And so we ended up just risking it. We were like, we have to build. We're putting the project at risk. It was the narrative that was happening was we weren't building. We didn't have information about when we would build. It was the public sector not being able to implement this really important project that was important to the economic of the local community. It was a terrible narrative that we were putting forth. So we built to the very squeaky wheels and those high profile, not high profile, but the important ones from an economic development perspective. We, let's see, this was, and so this was last year as we're kind of building here and there to folks. One company, for example, a software firm, had a project that a new project they could take on. They couldn't take it on if they didn't have expanded bandwidth. They were at capacity. They needed a lot of video interaction. It just wasn't going to work. And so we made an effort. We got them connected so it met their deadline. They were able to take on that project. That project needed a bunch of new staff. 20 to 30 new people were hired to support that project. That's why we connected that building. Other businesses that were important from an economic perspective, important, big, tall buildings, we worked to connect those in that year process where we were in a period of uncertainty with the EDA. We also had a lot of other things that we needed to work on besides just building the network. And one big thing is that we branded it. We gave it a name, we gave it a logo, and we got some stuff to advertise it. So it's called UgeNet, which I like it, because it sounds like it's huge. And it's Eugene. And so we made some stuff that we give out to folks. When we do conferences, when we do information locally, we have stickers that we give out to folks. And so, like, you see them on people's water bottles, and then people use them. If anybody wants a sticker, we had some brochures that we've used to help explain it to folks. And then when we do conferences, we also, we're vendors in other conferences, and we've got a little table runner with our logo on it. And so all of that stuff happened when we were in this period of uncertainty with the EDA. A lot of other folks connected to the network because we had that middle mile connection and the local ISPs had reduced costs for their backhaul. They were able to provide service elsewhere. And one of the things that happened was, this is a little a Facebook post. 2 school districts in the area are utilizing our middle mile infrastructure. Their service is 10 times faster than it used to be, and it's half the price. And so even though the project is really focused on economic development in downtown, it's had these positive benefits for the school districts. There's a rural community that is now has much better connectivity because an ISP is serving them through that middle mile infrastructure. So it's been very successful on that level. But meanwhile, we are still waiting on, no, this was another success story I wanted to mention. This is a local software company, and when they got connected, this was a post they put up on Facebook. It's a picture of them in front of their speed test on their new connection, showing 885 down and 949 up. And I love this picture because it's just infrastructure, but you never see anybody posting anything to Facebook about their new sewer connection or their new water connection using the word rad to describe it. And so it's just part of the enthusiasm people have had about this new infrastructure. And so back to the EDA. It was July 2016 we submitted our pre-application. And the full application was in 2016. But in March of 2018, we all came to the conclusion that it wasn't a good fit for the fiber build. And what it really came down to was the EDA grant it's all about jobs. It's economic development. But we're focused on the long term in jobs. We're looking to grow these software companies. But they're also really focused on the short term. And they needed to show that we were generating jobs during the construction period. And so they want you to contract out to construct whatever infrastructure you're building. Well, eWeb is working in this old underground space. Some of these vaults haven't been open for decades. They were not going to contract this out. They wanted their line workers to work with it, to develop the experience. They were not about ready to have somebody else in that space. And ultimately, we could not come together with the EDA on that issue. And so we walked away from a big chunk of that EDA grant. We're going to use that grant to fund the WICs, but that's it. And so what we ended up doing we got a funding gap. It's getting filled by 2 sources. One is, in the process of building over that last year and a half, eWeb lowered the total construction cost by $500,000. They learned and they figured out, it's going to cost $500,000 less. So that's a big gap we just filled. And then the telecom fund is going to fill the rest of the gap. It is 100% locally funded, the fiber build. Only the EDA is sponsoring the WICs. In that time period, we've connected 32 buildings. That's where we are today. We'll have the full network built out by the end of this calendar year. Right now, there's 5 ISPs that are active in the network. There's 3 of these are very, very active in the downtown. There's a lot of competition between 3 of them. And so this project, the primary goal of it was economic development. So what kind of impacts have we seen? So the first one I'm going to mention is Pipeworks software. This is the one that they took on a new project, but they needed the bandwidth to do it. So we connected them. They've hired 25 new people to serve this project. And this is, Eugene has a surprising number of software firms and a really surprising number of video game developers. These folks develop video games. If you have any 10-year-old boys in your house, they may know a game called Terraria. My kids exploded with excitement when they found out that our fiber networks was explicitly serving the game Terraria. So it's kind of just neat to see that interaction. They also do a lot of work for Department of Defense, because that's how they train soldiers now, is on video games. So 25 new jobs out of that connection. Nulia is a brand new company. It just formed. The folks that formed it didn't live in Eugene, but they decided to locate in Eugene and start their new company here because they liked Eugene, but also the fiber infrastructure ensured that they had that infrastructure they needed. They offer cloud-based concierge services. I cannot tell you what that is, but I can tell you they've hired 17 people and they're growing. And then another one is Sentinel One. This is a Bay Area-based cybersecurity firm. They were looking for a second office, and they just opened up one in Eugene. Right now, they're at 15 people. They expect to grow to 50 at the end of the year. They had a big PR event announcing that they were in Eugene, and it was fascinating to watch it. The CEO got up and talked, and he said, "We're here because of your labor force." And one reason they're here because of our labor force is our labor force was a third of the price of the Bay Area labor force. That was the big lure. The guy didn't even mention the fiber network. He also didn't mention that he needs water and electricity in his office. It has sort of become like the air we breathe. You just need it. It's there. It's a given. It has been around long enough that he didn't really think about it that much. But they would not have been there without having gigabit connectivity in their office space. And so what we've done with this network, with our little 32 building networks, it'll be 125 by the end of the year, is we have created a competitive landscape. There's multiple ISPs competing for business. We've seen service levels go up and prices come down because competition really does work. And so both Pam and I are here to answer any questions you may have about our project. There's lots and lots of details we didn't talk about, but it's been a fascinating process. I think we're all lucky to have worked on it. So thank you.